So Nim technically had to be using white magic. Because it's all healing magic and... Oh, but wait. Unaspected. Unaspected. It's all unaspected. None of it bears any aspect whatsoever. None of my abilities. Now that I think about it, they weren't using white magic. But then what were they using? Because they still had to be drawing on some source of magic. But if it's all unaspected, then what were they using? See, that does make more sense, actually. Like, I don't know what their source of magic was. Maybe they said it earlier, and since I haven't played Scholar in like 6 months, I've just forgotten the lore. But they had to be using some source of magic, so that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I don't know what that is then. Because the fairies aren't a source of magic. The fairies were like a representation of their magic. It's not like they drew their energy from fairies or anything. I don't know where they were drawing it from. But in the grand scheme of this like 3 pillars sort of thing they have going with Mach, Amdapor, and Nim, it does make a lot more sense, right? That Nim is like these gray mages in the middle that are just trying to keep everything under control. So they're drawing from some sort of source of magic that I guess was not causing the calamity to become worse, because they're drawing from some sort of unaspected magic. Again, I don't know what that is though. What could possibly be the source of unaspected magic that they're using? Because pretty much all magic has aspect of some kind or other. And, you know, 3 of them are astral and 3 of them are umbral. So... Okay, this is gonna kill me. I need to look this up now. I may be spoiling myself right now. That may be it. It may reveal it later on, but it may have revealed it previously, and I haven't played it in so long that I have no idea. Green Death, 7th Umbral. This is just a general... look at Nim. This doesn't talk about their magic specifically. This tries to affect the way Magi itself. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Venture will be able to aid the historians who flock to the notions of Ashran was once its patron deity? Really? Huh. That's interesting. Ashran, I believe, is the Traveler, one of the ones that we haven't really seen yet. No, yeah. Oh, no. Associated with Ashran the Wanderer. Magic from a lore standpoint. What is white magic? I don't need to know that. Where do red mages come from? What is the source? No. Scholars. Okay, do scholars use white magic? Whatever. No. Title says, what kind of magic do scholars wield? They depend on the magic of elemental spirits and use their powers to grant succor and purify various taints. Probably could have phrased that better, buddy. Their magic is similar, but it just seems that scholar magic pales in comparison from what I've seen to true white magic, like in Lost Amdapor. Hard. Could it be that scholar magic was a developing magic before the plague hit? No lore books ready, but I don't think they do. After all, they deal unaspected damage, which suggests non-elemental. They wield arcane magics, whatever that might mean. Back in the day, these 3 cities each had a different magical art. Amdapor had white, Mach had black, and Nim had arcane, whatever that means. And they were all at war. Pretty informative. Use a type of spellcasting called Arcanima. Well, that's just arcanists in general, which is distinct from both white and black. Really? It still has to draw on ether, though. Arcanima may be distinct from white and black, but it still has to draw on ether, so it has to draw from somewhere. Whether Arcanima is a new form of magic the Nemeans used or were developing, I don't believe so. Summoning was first invented by the Allagans. Yeah, which means Arcanima must date back at least to the Allagans, because they're the ones who created summoners. What are they talking about? Also, let me take this and send it over here. I want to still be able to see the chat while I'm reading up on this lore dive. Also, I should probably bring it up so you guys can check it out too, if you're at all interested, or so at least you don't think I'm just staring at the screen doing nothing. There. That's what I'm looking at. It's basically just the forums and people talking about it. There's an informative link about it. Oh, but it's a role player's link. I don't know. This is a role player's link. This is like non-Arcanist art and how they use their magic. Roots of art. Okay. Lore panels, Yamitra. Okay, so this is in-game stuff mostly. Trace back the esoteric calculations practiced by the people of the South Sea Isles. In their efforts to express the nature of ether in mathematical terms, they gave rise to the exacting science that we practice today. These definitive formulas... I should probably move around in-game. Oh, Jojo wasn't trying to say that to me. He was saying it to someone else. Anyway. Just need to move around in game a little so it doesn't like AFK me out. Spin formulas are represented by arcane geometries. Yeah, I know all of this. Manipulate etheric energy and produce specific effects. The ability to shape this energy also allows practitioners to manifest arcane entities. I know all of that. Every time you're talking about Arcanima, it seems like they just talk about it being arcane. They don't really talk about where it draws from. Does it draw from, like, all the aspects? Because most arcane energy is aspected. Modern-day Arcanima stems from the remnants of Nemean scholars who lived in and around Vilbrand roughly 1,600 years ago, beginning sometime in the years of a horrible plague, tactile magi, blah, blah, blah. Follow up on a question from the stream earlier. The taxonomy that fairies fall into. Is there an origin on how they become fairies of scholars? Were they fairies and then bound to scholars? Well, no. No. The fairies that we use as scholars are not fairies like the fairies of Ilmeg in any way, shape, or form. The fairies we use as scholars are arcane constructs. That much has been very clarified. They're more like carbuncle than they are Titania. Yes, the second one. Were they fairies and bound to scholars as scholars create them? Yeah, see the second one, fairies again. While they fall under the taxonomy of elementals, they're actually beings that were created. They did not exist before. The scholar would take the energies in elementals from around them and would basically create these beings that were made of the elements. Oh. Is what the designer's trying to say there is that people who use Arcanima draw upon, like, the power of elementals that exist in the world around them? Kind of like the elementals in Gridania, just like elemental spirit beings that sort of exist in the world rather than specifically aspected arcane energy? That'd be really disturbing if they were pixies from the first. Yeah, they're not. Scholars, in turn, are descendant from an even more ancient form of magic called summoning, a famed practice of ancient Alleg. Yes. I already know that. So are the scholars not contributing to the calamity by, like, drawing on the power of elemental spirit beings that already existed in the world? Pixies over there are born of the souls of dead children. Oh. Really? wonder if that was covered in MSQ or if that's covered in some side thing, because I don't remember them talking about that. I do recall that being like an old lore thing about pixies in the real world fables, like in our fables of pixies. Like in some of them, the souls of dead children become fairies and pixies and things like that. Like all sorts of fae, actually. I think the souls of dead children become like fairies and pixies and spriggans and all sorts of things like that. Boggarts? Not boglins, definitely not boglins. Boggarts, I think they're called. Stuff like that, like all sorts of fae. Beings of ether born from the souls of departed children that have absorbed the ambient ether of Titania, the king of the pixies. Oh. I didn't realize they had incorporated like real world folk story versions of Pixies' origins into Final Fantasy XIV, but it makes sense. History enrolled the summoner. We may never forget the tragedy that befell unfortunate Tristan. Oh yeah, Ymitra. Who harnesses the energy of the primals and reshapes it into a biddable avatar. Yeah. So the more I'm looking at this, the more it seems like instead of drawing upon the raw ether of the world the way that white and black magic did, thus like hastening the calamity, it seems like Nim and Allig before them, though I don't think Allig did this because they desperately wanted to protect the world from calamity. I think Nim continued this practice because they were trying not to push the world to its brink the way that the white and black mages were. But it seems like what they're doing is like drawing upon etheric spirits that already exist in the world to fuel their power. Like for summoners, it's primals. It draws upon like the ether that's created in the world from the existence of primals, which does come from like the raw ether of the world as well as the raw ether from crystals, which again is just more raw ether from the world. But once it exists, it's not like it's going to just go back to nothing. So they're drawing upon the power of primal. Well, they would have been fueling a calamity then in Allig, because they were actively creating primals, which took a lot of ether. And then they were using those primals as a power source. But Nim, it feels like Nim 7 remake while I was offline, but my PS5 was like, no. God. It's so annoying. As known as Eggy, only those who are present at the defeat of a primal and have captured its savage essence are able to manifest such etheric entities. It almost sounds like summoning is using, but it's not. I know it's not, because I know how it happens. Breath of the Wild instead. No, that's a good one. Reach its peak, blah blah blah, eventually, blah 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 blah. Possible spoiler. While the official history credits the Alligans with the creation of summoning, certain aspects of the MSQ heavily suggest that the Asians may have taught the Alligans. That's not possible. That's not certain aspects. It's directly stated. This may be a very old post, because by the point we're at now in the game, it's been directly stated that the Alligans taught, or that the Asians taught the Alligans. They were trying to create calamities, so they were teaching people how to summon. Alligans created summoning and enslaved the essence of defeated primals to their will. 3,000 years later, using a derivative form of summoning, Nimians create and bond with an elemental-like creature called a Fae to bolster their arcanima. Oh wait, so Fae do exist in the source? See, this part feels like this is the writer jumping to conclusions, because they immediately say they create and bond with an elemental-like creature called a Fae, but at no point have I heard that Fae legitimately exist in the source, like fairies and things like that. We haven't seen that be the case. They exist in the first, but we haven't seen them in the source. I guess we've seen creatures that could be considered Fae in the source, not fairies specifically, but summon or commune with these Fae, but they're not. Again, see, this feels like the person jumped to sudden conclusions without actual basis here. The ability to summon or commune with these fae, but they're not. The fairies that the scholars summon are not fae in any way, shape, or form. The fairies that the scholars summon are arcane constructs like Carbuncle, created from the vision of the scholars of like what they believe to embody the source of like healing energy. So they created fairies. Thought the fairies were yeah, see, yeah, the fairies are constructs. This is not summoning or communing with fae in any way, shape, or form. Fairies are constructs, just like Carbuncle or the Eggies. They are constructs created from the beliefs of the summoners. Right? Like, we even have the ability to glamour our fairies now. And Thubergeim, I went and I did that off stream, which is a little unfortunate. Maybe I should have saved it for this stream so I could have done it with you guys. But Thubergeim, back at the Arcanist Guild, when I went and I did the quick little quest that unlocked fairy glamoring, specifically talks about the fact that fairies are just an arcane construct. Fairies are just an arcane construct, like any other arcane construct we create, which is exactly why we can glamour our fairy not only to look like Celine, which I've done, but you can also glamour your fairy to look like a Carbuncle, because it's just an arcane construct. You can, as long as you keep the idea of this is a construct designed to help heal my allies in your head, you can basically shape it to look like whatever you want. Yeah, this part here, I'm not gonna read this part here, because this part here is not like in-game lore. This is the writer like jumping to conclusions and assumptions based on what they think is right. Sansi wrote, I don't know. No, I'm not reading anything Sansi wrote. Anonymous Arcanist, Lodestone. Here's Lodestone stuff. Adepts of the art of Arcanum derive their might from symbols of power born of geometric techniques hailing from across the southern seas. Held within occult grimoires, these symbols lend shape to the Arcanist's ether. Oh, well, there you go. There's the answer right there. These symbols lend shape to the Arcanist's ether. So they're not drawing on the world at all. How can Arcanists and summoners and scholars be possibly as powerful as they can grow to be if they're not drawing on the ether of the world at all? Because one of the driving factors in a lot of etheric lore in game is the idea that someone who draws upon only their own personal reserve of ether just can't be as strong as other people, which is why the red mages designed all these mechanics to help them sort of like balance their ether and their physical abilities and balance their own personal ether. Yeah, but red mages have specifically built into their lore like all of these practices and teachings that they've developed to help like amplify their own ether so that they don't have to draw on the ether of the world around them. I guess, no, you know what? I guess current era black mages don't draw on, well, no. Current era black mages might still draw on the ether of the world around them. Current era thaumaturges in lore don't draw on the ether of the world around them either. They use their personal ether too. Maybe the construct helps with that. It is possible. It is possible that the reason why they summon carbuncles, eggies, or fairies is to like help them manage their own ether pool. That might be the case. Though, yeah, now that I think about it, maybe they're not. Maybe this is why it seems like old era, Allagan era summoners and Mach and Amdapor era white and black mages are like these huge fucking legends who accomplished amazing things that we can never do these days. Is that maybe no one really draws upon the ether of the world to fuel their stuff as much anymore? I do think current era black mages, I do believe, are still using the ether of the world around them as well as their own internal ether. I think white mages are as well. I don't know. I think white mages are deriving their power from the elementals. I don't know if that drains from the world or if the elementals are like these spirits that already exist, and so you're just sort of using their personal pool of ether. But maybe that's why we don't seem to do the huge, insane shit that old black mages and white mages got up to. Is because we just don't pull from the world's ether like the way they did. So maybe that's it. But at least this finally answered my question. The reason why Nimian magic, except for the limit break, I guess, yeah. The reason why Nimian magic can be like, well, it didn't fuel the calamity the way the white and black magic did back then, and they were in the middle as like these gray mages trying to maintain some amount of like ceasefire and like trying to protect the world or whatever, right? And Black Mage Limit Break is 100% Mock speaking through time, and Mock says, burn, pretty much. Is because even back then, even back when the white and black mages were creating freaking giant statues filled with souls, constructs to wage war, and creating gargantuan meteor storms to blast through the white mage castles and shit like that, Nim was off to the side using only their own personal internal pools of ether, right? And not drawing from the world around them. I guess that would make sense. I do think it has actually come up a couple of times in game. I can't recall exactly where, because I was thinking about the Thaumaturge questline and that one brother who does not have a good pool of ether, a reserve of ether of his own, and that's why the other Thaumaturges like don't want to teach him, because it's like it'd be too dangerous for him to become a Thaumaturge. And that's the sort of thing I'm thinking of, but at no point during that questline do I think anyone told him he should try being an Arcanist instead. But so I don't know where exactly I'm pulling this from. I may be pulling this out of my ass, or it may be from other parts in game that I've seen and just kind of forgotten about. But I do believe it has come up a couple of times in game where like conjurers or thaumaturges or people who are doing... Would they suggest that though? Yeah, see, they wouldn't suggest that. They wouldn't have bothered to suggest that. And not even just because they don't want him to practice anything other than thaumaturgy or they're greedy or anything like that, but because it didn't feel like the guys at the Thaumaturge Guild even really understood or knew much about arcanistry. So, you know, guilds seem to think about other magic. Yeah. Like, I don't even think they know much about arcanistry or if it's even an option. So I know it didn't come from there. But I get this feeling in my gut, like I've seen in a couple places in game, where people who are not cutting it as like conjurers, thaumaturges, black mages, white mages, things like that, and seen like other characters recommend that they should take up arcanistry instead. I can't recall where that's from. Like I said, I may just be pulling that out of my ass. I can't recall exactly where, but I feel like I've seen that in game at least a couple of times. Where people recommend doing arcanistry instead of other magics because it's like easier for people with less ether to do that kind of magic. Like the arcane geometries and the constructs and things like that just make it easier to sort of wield arcanistry than it is to wield other magics. Tataru does that right and somehow makes an eternal carbuncle. Yeah. I did like the original section with Tataru taking up arcanistry where she was just like terrible at it and her carbuncle was a coward and running away and stuff. And it's like, you know. Nimian summoning really is wrought from summoning techniques. I don't care. The gist is that you're essentially using the magic of mathematics. No. Well, yes. You are essentially using mathematics. No. You're essentially using geometry, which is a form of mathematics, but specifically geometry to channel your own ether. Geometry, specifically the inks used to draw the geometries, are metallic in nature that are conductive to the flow of ether. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Every time you're creating an Arcanist Grimoire, you're creating like an ethereally infused metallic ink to create the book. That's something they do. So they are drawing from the world to some degree as well, I think. Or maybe the book draws from the wielder. Are the Arcanist Grimoires just like batteries that like a mechanist might use or a machinist might use or something kinda? Oh, I got zoned out. Oh well. I was just thinking I should tab over and move around a little bit and I got kicked out. Oh well, who cares? I think the Arcanist Grimoires are basically batteries. I think as you like build up your own internal reserve of ether over time, just by like eating food and drinking and sleeping and shit like that, just like generally taking in ether from the world around you, but not aggressively, not the way, like I said, black mages and white mages wielded it back in the day. Just sort of slowly building it up over time. I think the Arcanist Grimoire might work as a battery. Like it draws ether out of the person who's wielding it into the etherically charged like metallic inks in the book itself, and that would help. That would absolutely help. So that when the alchemist goes to wield their magics, they're like drawing off the reserves in the battery that is their book, and then they're also drawing off the reserves in their own body rather than the world around them. I think we have our answer, guys. They use their own personal reserves of ether rather than the ether of the world around them, as well as whatever they've like stored over time in the Arcanist grimoires that they carry with them. That just sort of like leeches small amounts of energy off of them like day by day at any point in time.